good morning, and welcome to the International Mastermind Association Think and Grow Rich show. My name is Galen Bingham. I am the leadership strategist, and this is going to be another incredible show. Today, we're going to be talking about the sixth sense. And the sixth sense is one of those principles that really only makes sense and really only has power after you've mastered all of the other principles. And we're going to be talking about what that is, what that looks like. And not only are we going to be sharing that with you and having an incredible conversation, we've got an amazing guest, someone who's been here before, Miss Janna Dutton, and she's going to be coming in from Canada. So she's in central Canada. So we're delivering on that international part of the International Association. And this is going to be an amazing conversation. So get ready, come on in. And as you know, there was a trivia question at the beginning of this. So I'm going to give you time to send in your answers. Send in your answers as to whether that trivia question is true or false. The sixth sense principle is the seventh step to riches, true or false. Let me go ahead and see your comments coming in wherever you're watching this conversation. And as we wait for you to respond, I want to give you just a sense of what the sixth sense is before I bring in my co-host, Miss Ann McNeil. And we're already starting to get some answers. Doretha Dennis has already answered the question that false. That's not true. That's not true at all. That the sixth sense is the 13th principle. And it is, let's say, the 13th principle known as the sixth sense, throughout which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from the demands by the individual. This principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I can think of no other person to join me in this conversation, to elevate this conversation, than the master builder herself, Miss Ann McNeil. Come on in, Miss Ann.
Good morning, Galen, and everybody. This is going to be, yes, another one of those phenomenal conversations because we can't quite put our finger on it. Yes, that feeling, that hunch, that something in the room when two or three are gathered. Don't know what it is, but the author says it has a name. And that name he's calling it is the sixth sense. And like Galen just shared, it is the connecting link to so many, many things that we feel, but we cannot touch. And it really, as he says, it describes that feeling you get as you get older from experience. Those times when you know that you know, but you don't quite know why. And as we get into this chapter and talk with our special guest today, we know that Napoleon Hill talks about his invisible counselors. Well, I would suggest that we all have those invisible counselors, and we're going to get into that this morning, Galen. I'm just very excited again to be here with you and our guests. And for those of you that watch us every week, yes, we are the Magnificent Two today. So we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, so we're gonna have fun without Peter and Pagine. So they're missing out, but they are taking some time to focus on equally important things. So we want to wish them well and welcome them back as soon as they can come back. One other point that I want to share, and this is on page 228 of the book, because I think that this is a great launching pad for the conversation, especially as we get ready to bring in today's guest. And I want to read this. Through the aid of the sixth sense, you will be warned of impending dangers in time to avoid them and notified of opportunities in time to embrace them. This comes to your aid and to do your bidding with the development of the sixth sense, a guardian angel who will be open to you at all times, through the door of the temple of wisdom. So that's what we're talking about. And as Ms. Ann said, it's those opportunities that come along and you just kind of know that you need to go right instead of going left, and you don't quite know how you knew that. And it's those situations where you just get a hunch, you get a sense that this is something that we need to do, and you can't really explain why, but it turns out to be the decision, the instinct that made all the difference in the world. One of the people that I definitely want to bring into this conversation is our guest, because she is an entrepreneur. She actually owns one of my favorite QSR concepts in the whole wide world, Tim Hortons. They I was exposed to them when they were just doing donuts, but they're doing a whole lot more things than just donuts now. And she owns several of them. So, Janna, come on into the conversation. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Good morning from chilly Canada.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the fact that
Chilly.
this is not Parker weather. This is not windbreaker weather up there.
Well, it is today, luckily, but we do get some pretty frigid temperatures coming up. So,
well, talk a little bit about your background, because I just shared just a little bit with the audience about what you do, and I can't think of a space that is more dependent on instinct and the sixth sense than being an entrepreneur. And so you are the perfect person to talk about the sixth sense, but share a little bit about your background and your exposure to Think and Grow Rich before we get into this conversation.
well, we talk a lot about successful people, and quite often a lot of successful people and people that are willing to work hard have very difficult backgrounds. And I'm one of those people. I grew up quite poor, severe poverty. I tell a story about how all I had in my refrigerator was a bottle of ketchup, and it's all about the perspective and how you look at these things that happen in your life. And I had all the ingredients for tomato soup in my fridge, right? But at the time I couldn't see that. So I've trained myself to look for these opportunities and look for these signs and look at them in different ways. And in that way, you're able to keep building. So the sixth sense to me is just incredible. And I go through my life trying to notice what I'm noticing. So noticing the small details, noticing what can be found that's good in every situation. And when you do that, you kind of envelop a feeling of positivity and greatness within yourself. And then it propels you to move on.
Well, fantastic. Well, we definitely want to get into all of the principles, but I would love to hear, before we even go into that, Miss Ann, I'd love to hear from Janna. How were you first exposed to this whole philosophy, the book Think and Grow Rich? What was your first exposure to that, and where were you in life when you were first exposed to the book?
Well, I would say that I have always inherently known a lot of these principles, and I've always followed a lot of the principles, even though I didn't know them in a formal sense. And I was already quite successful in my career when I was exposed to the book and exposed to the principles and dove into them deeply, and I'm still doing that. You can't stop. It's one of those things that once you start learning, you discover that there's so much more that you don't know. So I think it's important to continue on with that learning. But I would say in depth and beginning to study them in a formal way, probably about 5 years ago or so, and I continue to do it today. I would say my greatest mastermind right now is the one that I have with my intuition or with an infinite intelligence. But I also meet up with a lady every single morning and we read for about a half an hour. And that has created a mastermind, because 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2. 1 + 1 equals a greater power than that, because you're developing a whole new entity. So I would say that is one of my best relationships with the infinite and with the sixth sense, because I receive messages and I learn to trust myself. You got to let things happen.
Oh my gosh. You're getting into the juicy part of this conversation already. So, Miss Ann, before we get into this and get into some really, really impactful and empowering questions, I would love for you to share just how all of these principles work together so that we can have a foundation for this conversation. Because as we said before, the sixth sense, it's helpful by itself, but it really only takes up power once you've mastered all of the other principles. So it might be helpful for us to share what all those other principles are so that we can understand the real power behind the sixth sense.
Wow, Galen, I think you just wrapped it up between you and Janna, because what she just shared wraps the 13 principles up. And we're going to come back to that, because the author tells us that step by step, all of the preceding chapters led us to this one. And whether we are ready to accept it or not, I would encourage all of us, do not be skeptical, because just trust. And Jana just said, I wrote down what you said. You said, trust yourself. And so right now we're going to listen to the 13 principles, and then we're going to come back and we're going to discuss this particular one called the sixth sense or infinite intelligence, whichever one you choose to call it. So let's run the tape.
Number 1 is desire. Napoleon Hill said that everything starts with a burning desire, a compelling reason for doing what it is we do. Step 2 is faith, having belief in our ability to attain that which we desire. Step 3 is what we call autosuggestion. Autosuggestion simply means being very intentional about the things that we are pouring into our thoughts, into our brains, and into our consciousness. Our brains, our minds will receive everything automatically, but we have to work extra hard to make sure that the positive things are what we are feeding ourselves, because those positive thoughts are going to turn into positive actions. Step number 4 is specialized knowledge. No one person knows everything, even about whatever their particular area of expertise might be. And the value of the MasterMind principle is using the specialized knowledge of other people. Step number 5 is imagination, the workshop of the mind. Everything starts with our imagination and our thoughts, the burning desire to transform those thoughts into our reality. In order to do that, we have to take a look at step 6, which is organized planning. That is how we crystallize our desire into action, organizing ourselves. Having the thought and not acting on the thought isn't going to get us anywhere. We have the thought, we go through the organized planning to transform that thought into action. Step number 7 is decision. What Napoleon Hill said is the mastery of procrastination. Napoleon Hill said that the antidote to procrastination is simply to make a decision and then move on that decision. Step 8 is persistence. We have to have a sustained effort which is induced by our faith in order to achieve our goals. One of Napoleon Hill's books I love, even the title, 3 Feet from Gold. Those people who became rich during the gold rush in the wild, wild west days didn't do that because they were necessarily smarter or had better information than anyone else. It's because they stayed just a little bit longer. Sometimes people left when they were just literally 3 feet from gold. So hanging in there, being persistent, is step number 8. Step number 9, the power of the mastermind, the driving force. None of us can accomplish anything on our own. Everybody, I don't care who you are, from the most prominent person to the person who might be considered the lowest on the totem pole, everybody has someone who helped them get to where they are. And the power of the mastermind is being able to use those influences around us, use the thoughts, use the knowledge, use the exploration of other people to help us in achieving our goal. Step number 10, the mystery of sex transmutation. This title can be a little confusing, but essentially what the mystery of sex transmutation means is that we oftentimes in our society think of sex as being purely physical. It is absolutely physical, but what Napoleon Hill teaches us is that sex also has an emotional element, and that sex is the strongest of our desires. That if we can take our sexual energy, transform that into positive, creative influences, it can propel us to new heights. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about the mystery of Step 10, which is sex transmutation. Step number 11 is the subconscious mind, which Napoleon Hill tells us is the connecting leap between our human mind and the infinite intelligence, the source of all thought, the source of all creativity. Conscious mind, we spent some time talking about how we use that through the influence of autosuggestion and what we're feeding into our mind. Step number 12, which is the brain, the broadcasting and receiving station of thought. Final step number 13, the sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom. This is the final step through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from or demands by the individual. The principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles.
All right. So there you have all of the steps. And, before we get into this conversation deeper, I want to read from page 236 because this is something that really captured me this time. And towards the middle of the page, it says, no matter who you are or what may have been your purpose for reading this book, you can profit by it without understanding the principle described in this chapter. This is especially true if your major purpose is to accumulate money or other material things. So you don't have to understand this chapter, but this chapter on the sixth sense was included because the book is designed for the purpose of presenting a complete philosophy by which individuals may unerringly guide themselves to attaining whatever they ask for in life. So you can get a lot out of all the other principles by themselves without this, especially if you're only thinking about how to accumulate money or material things. But this chapter is the one that gives you really the fuel to achieving almost anything that you want in life. And this one only has power after you've mastered all the other steps. So, Janna, I want to bring you back in because my question really does build off of the passage that I just read. What's something that you have accomplished or achieved or that has happened to you in life that it really just came because of a hunch? It came because of an instinct. You can't really add. I think you said earlier, 2 + 2 didn't add up to 4. 2 + 2 turned into 7 or 8 or 9. And that math doesn't really make sense other than it was your sixth sense stepping in to make it happen for you.
Well, I can remember a specific situation, and it wasn't necessarily a big gain for me, but I remember the moment when I really started to listen. And it was not that many years ago, probably within 6-7 years ago. But what happened was I was sitting at a red light in the middle of town in my car, and all of a sudden what pops into my head is, what happened to that coat that I took to the dry cleaner? I wonder whatever happened to that coat. I wonder where it is, because I haven't seen it for a long time. And within hours, my phone rang, and it was the dry cleaner telling me that they had my coat. I didn't know where it was. I mentioned the dry cleaner earlier. And I don't know whether I thought of the dry cleaner or whether the dry cleaner was thinking of me. But when I started thinking about where is this coat, the coat appeared. And it was only after that that I really started noticing and paying attention to these things that I was feeling and these things that I was noticing, and then applying them and trusting them. So I would say that, listening to your intuition, listening to these messages is so important, because they are happening around you, but only when you pay attention do you have the opportunity to follow through. So nothing specific there, but that's probably the most memorable story I have about listening to my intuition.
Yeah, and I love the phrase that you use there, in that these things are always happening around you. The question is, are you listening to them? Are you paying attention to them? And so with that, I want to bring in Ms. Ann. I know that you have been, your story is pretty famous. 1979 was when you were first introduced to this. And since then, your life has really changed because you have been responding to these instincts. You've been responding to these hunches. What are your thoughts about what Janna has shared already, and what questions do you have?
3 had before the program started to answer that question. Because yes, like Janna about the coat, for me, it was the 1979 December 31st situation where you put it so well, Janet. You said, these things are happening, but are we listening? And so for me, it was that night and the realization the following days and weeks and months that passed about the chapter on the mastermind and its sixth sense, infinite intelligence. The book said, if you have a problem, an issue, which I did, which was broken, he said, find others who have the same and create this mastermind group. And so, Galen, for me, it was that realization and that moment. And actually, I think I'm still in the moment, even though we think of a moment as in the seconds, if you will. But so is life, right? So, Jan, I want to go back to the conversation we had prior to the program, because I want to share with our audience, we are hosting a beta test on this conversation, because what you said about your friend reading the 30 minutes a day, as we talk about this entire sixth sense, how do you really connect with it? And the author tells us oftentimes it's after a certain age. And I think he tells us that because the challenges and problems and struggles we've embraced, if you will, if you can embrace those, would lead you to that voice, that hunch, that inspiration, that spirit, if you will. But the same holds true when we decide to bring people into our inner circle, right? And so, Galen, I just want to share with our audience that we are hosting a beta test group, which will create best practices for mastermind groups. This is for mastermind groups of accountability. What's the good, the bad, and the ugly in a mastermind group that you can turn into best practices for a better group? And so Janna, Galen, and I, we were having a conversation, and as always, Galen said, wait, we got to talk about that on the show. So this is the show. Let's talk about it now. So Janna, I'd like for you to share some conversations that you shared with us when we were talking about these best practices. What are some of these best practices, and how does the sixth sense help you? How does infinite intelligence help you to have a better, we'll call the word better, mastermind experience inside of a mastermind group? So if you can share with us what you shared before the program started, please.
So I have in the past built a mastermind group specifically with a purpose. Every mastermind has a purpose, and the purpose of the mastermind group I built a couple of years ago was all regarding philanthropy and raising money. And we brought individuals into the group one at a time, being key. And every time we brought an individual into our group, we made sure that there was no conflicts. So by conflicts, we meant personally or professionally, and we would vet each new member with the existing members, because once that member is brought in, it's really hard to take them out of the group. So as a best practice, we made sure that there was no conflicts amongst our group, and we would discuss the person and their profession and ensure that it wasn't going to, well, I hate to say, direct the energy maybe in the group and stop us from moving forward and expanding in that expression of what we were trying to achieve.
Thank you for that. And I just wanted to have her share that, because one of the things that the author says that if you really want an effective mastermind group, now we're talking about best practices, you start with one person, just one more person. So that would be you and one more person. The two of you must be in total agreement. And this is trying the spirit by the spirit. This is where the infinite intelligence comes in. Because, like Emerson says, the soul knows. And the soul is the perceiver and the revealer of truth. So the two of you really, and this is what Janna's expressing to us through her Philanthropist Mastermind. The three of you then must be in total agreement before you allow the fourth person in. The four of you must be in total agreement before you allow the fifth in. And within our mastermind association, we have some groups that have been together. I'm thinking about Beatrice, Rufus, and Angela, for example, the three of them for 15 years. And there are others that have been together longer. So as we discuss this sixth sense, I want to challenge each of you as you listen and share. Please comment, like, and share the show. But as you listen to this conversation, think about who's in your inner circle and why. Think about the people that left and what caused them to leave. Maybe no words were spoken, but it might be simply a spirit. Jen, I'd like to have you come back and share a little bit. And Galen, I'm going to just read a little bit more about her bio, because I really want to just make sure that in addition to people understanding that she has Tim Hortons, if you will, Jan is also dedicated to her community, and she's always leading from a place of humility and service. And I'd like to have you, Jan, if you would share with us. I think you have a special project you're working on also, utilizing the Napoleon Hill principles and some children, if you can share that.
Well, 2 years ago, Christmas of 2019, they say change is never made unless you do something, a constant spaced repetition, or you have an emotional impact, right?
Yes.
And so I experienced an emotional impact. And a lot of times people feel like emotional impact has to be something tragic, something with great tragedy, such as like a heart attack or an illness or a death in the family. But in this situation, my emotional impact came from, I was at a school, at a community school, and I was donating books to the children. Coming from my background, I felt, although they might not appreciate a book in the moment, if they were bored over the Christmas holidays, they might just pick up that book and get some enjoyment out of it. So I distributed some books amongst the grade 3, 4, and 5 children at this school. And it was after that moment that the teacher in the classroom did something very magical. She said, "Now, children, how many of you is this the very first book you're going to own?" And all of these kids put up their hands, and I get goosebumps. I got goosebumps right now. I call those truth bumps, because in that moment, that there's something special going on. And that's that sixth sense almost, right, coming through, right? So you get the goosebumps and you get that feeling like, oh, something important just happened here. And when we got out into the hallway, I'm choking back tears. And I said to her, you can't do that to me, I'm holding my heart. And she says, well, I just knew that you would really understand the impact of this. And so when I left that day, I knew how much those books had cost me. I knew I couldn't give a book to everybody. So I left, and, it wasn't that long after I said, well, in order to control the cost, why don't I just make my own book? So in the moment, I was very actively studying Think and Grow Rich and Napoleon Hill's work. And so I had just taken the certification course for the Napoleon Hill Foundation. And so I loosely used those principles to create a story about children and how they have the power within them to create a mastermind and create their own way out of their situations. So this book is in development. The illustrations are almost done. I was just there yesterday checking them out, and it's in its final edits and polish. But the hope with this book isn't just to sell a book. This isn't necessarily to make a living for myself. I've already got a really good living. It's to make an impact for the children. So the idea is that we will sell a copy of this book, and in turn, what that will do is generate enough funds to donate a book to a school that might need it, or to a child that might need it. So coming full circle. So not only will it feel good for me to be able to give this into the world, but for everybody else to be able to share it. So that's my big project right now, what I'm working on.
Well, Galen, I know you're biting at the bit to come back, but I just must make this statement. Yeah. Janna, you may or may not have known, but we meet with a group of kids every Sunday for 30 minutes, hosting a youth mastermind group. And I've been doing that now for 30 years. And they are reading the book. And now we've done it long enough now to where children have children because they're grown. And I was sharing, and I cannot share enough the fact that 2-3 weeks ago, for the first time, I watched my 5-year-old granddaughter host the Zoom for the other kids as she read her favorite, as Gayla liked to call it, as she read her favorite passage from the persistence chapter. And then they asked her to explain what she read. And she said, "Come back to me." So thank you so very much for what you're doing in a philanthropic way. And I think that we're all saying this is the sixth sense at work. This is really what it looks like. Acting on the hunch, the inspirations, and the urgings, if you will, of the spirit. But what happens so often, you call it truth bumps. What happens so often, we get these feelings, but then we just go right by them. We don't stop and pay attention. And that's one of the reasons why journaling is so very important, masterminding is so very important, and finding people who are of like minds and like spirits that you can share these thoughts with. And this is a large reason why we actually host this show. So Janna and Galen, I'll come back to Galen. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, one of my favorite parts of this particular principle and chapter is when Napoleon Hill talks about his invisible counsel. And I've got an invisible board of directors, same concept, but it's where you try to infer, you try to imagine what other people might do in the situations, people that you admire. I wonder if you've got either an invisible board of directors or an actual board of directors that you talked about your mastermind group, but how have you used that principle of getting counsel from an invisible counsel to help you make decisions? Because that's a big part of this principle for Napoleon Hill.
Yeah, I do use this. And what I do is I actually say that when we have a difficult situation, that problem, we need to get it out of us. We need to express the problem or the challenge that we're having. So what I do is I actually write that challenge or that problem out on a piece of paper. And when you get that problem out of you through writing, it's no longer inside of you. So then you don't view it as a problem inside of you. It's a thing on a piece of paper. It's something to be dealt with. It's not a problem with you. So I get that thing out of me onto a piece of paper and I stick it on my desk. And like this board of directors or counselor, you can imagine the important people in your world and in your life and go around the table and you can say, "Mom, how would you deal with this problem?" Because she would deal with a problem from maybe a motherly instinct or something, but if I went to someone like Bob Proctor, he would view this problem and attack the problem in a different way. So by mentally asking the people in your world, people that you respect, admire, whether it's their advice or their skill set, how they would deal with that problem, it gives you ideas, sixth sense, intuition, ways to deal with a problem that you might not have originally.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that idea, and I'm actually going to take that on myself because you're absolutely right. When we think that if we're thinking about it, then we're actually working on it. But there's so much more power, when you write it down, because now it's not inside of you. It's something objective that you can approach and attack and address. I love that.
Yeah, good.
The other thing that you mentioned that I just really loved, and Miss Ann talked about this a bit, you acted in the moment. A lot of this is about acting in the moment. So very often, people will, and I have, I've had an instinct, I've had a thought, and I've thought, wow, that's interesting. And that's as far as I've taken it. I didn't act on it. When was the first time or significant time you could think of, and you just shared a great one with your book, where you acted in the moment? And because you acted in the moment, scripture talks about walk by faith, not by sight. I talk a lot about this interview with the entertainer Jay-Z, and he says that we should all be in pursuit of being in the space of knowing, right?
Mhm.
So what was a time? What was another time when you acted on instinct, and
Mm.
if you had delayed maybe even another minute, you might not have had the same opportunity as you realized because you acted in the moment.
Well, I have a great behind the scenes story that popped into my head while you were asking me that question. You know, sometimes we do things for a purpose. My daughter wanted to go, and she wanted to be able to go and volunteer for a Tony Robbins event a couple of years ago. But because she was underage, she was only 15 at the time, she required me to go as a supervisor for her, so to speak. So getting into volunteer when you haven't before is very difficult within the organization. And I had to apply and apply and apply and apply and prove that I had the resourcefulness to get in. But when I got in, I was sitting in the room and a lady came in looking for a volunteer. And I was there with no agenda. My only purpose for being there was to be there as a supervisor so that my daughter could attend as well. And she asked for a volunteer, and nobody in the room was putting their hand up. So I put my hand up, and the lady right beside me slapped my arm down and she said, "Oh, you don't want that job." And I kind of looked at her and I was really shocked by her reaction because we were all there to serve and to volunteer. So I put my hand up a little bit higher. And so, of course, I got the position. I was the only one that wanted it. But what the role ended up being was Tony Robbins' personal assistant's assistant. And I got a behind the scenes, in the dressing room type of look at that show. And I had a great time. I worked harder probably than I've ever worked in my life as a volunteer. I was running around the city of Las Vegas, finding different things. If they forgot something in the room, I'd run back to the room and get it. I was finding hair elastics and supplements and laying out socks and cutting avocados and peeling bananas. And it was quite the experience to see the show from the inside out instead of from the outside in. So my intuition told me to put my hand up because I wasn't there for any purpose except to serve. And I got this magical gift of an experience. So I think just listening to yourself and not letting your environment or this other girl that was beside me stop me from doing what I felt was right.
Wow, that is such a fantastic story. And you're right. I mean, had you analyzed, had you continued your conversation with the lady next to you, you
Mhm.
might have said, "Well, maybe you're right. Maybe I don't want this opportunity." And
Mhm.
boy, your life would not have been as magical as it has been.
Mhm.
One
Yeah,
of the things
it opens a door.
I love that. I love that. One of the things, and I want to bring in Miss Ann back in, but because one of the things that I've personally experienced with Miss Ann, with her urging, is this annual meeting, because that was one of those things where I didn't feel like I needed to go. Right? It's like I don't need another meeting. I don't need to travel for this stuff. Do you know my background? I kind of know what's going on. But boy, had I stayed in that space of ignorance and didn't respond to your urging, to the spirit's urging, and attend that annual meeting the first year, oh my gosh, my life would be a fraction of what it is now. Talk a little bit, Miss Ann, about this annual meeting, and how that really does tie into the sixth sense at another level.
Well, I'd like to talk about a chance meeting in the hallway before I talk about that meeting.
That's what started this whole thing.
Yes, yes. So, Jana, Galen and I met as a chance meeting in the hallway of NSA. Now, are you a member of
Mhm.
NSA, Jana?
I am not, but I am on my way to a course in Atlanta next week. So I am taking a professional speakers course next week, and I may join.
Consider wherever you are in the world, in the Canada
Mhm.
area, consider becoming a member of NSA because Galen and I met at NSA. And he was actually like, he shares his story, and I'll share that portion of it. Then I'll get to the IMA annual. He was just walking down the hall. Can I say clueless, Galen? Just
Yeah, that
wandering.
definitely qualifies.
So I saw him. I actually walked out of the room where we were getting ready to host our Black NSA event. And I asked him if he was coming in. And of course, you know, he shares his own thoughts about, he just followed suit. And so in following suit, I really want to thank you, Galen, for just continuing to follow suit, because again, everything we are sharing is how the sixth sense works. It really is how there are no chance meetings. There really are no chance meetings. There really are not. And if we think so, just keep reading these principles, keep reading this book, and keep living. And so we host on an annual basis. I call it a meeting for your life. You know, oftentimes we talk about our business, and I would tell people for many years as an entrepreneur and the first Black female contractor in our state of Florida, I thought my name was MCO Construction because I had no life. I had allowed my business to become my life. But through this masterminding process, at least annually, we would host what we call, this is not a conference. Let me keep saying this. So there's no keynote speaker. There's no conference bags. There's none of that. It's you. You are the corporation, and this is for your life. And so on January the 7th and 8th, we will be in Boca Raton at the Embassy Suites, starting actually the 7th for I like to call it open mic, but it's a founder's reception where we just come and share for a moment, a minute, some experiences from the year. But then on Saturday morning, we bring our life in writing, and we send out to the world, how to write your annual report for your life, starting with your mission, your vision. What are your goals in the 10 areas of your life, starting with your spiritual, your family, your financial? What about your health and your education? What about your personal development? Do you have a plan for that? And then we go on to talk about your business or your career. And what about recreation, creativity, and the civic area of your life? But I like to encourage people to write these goals for 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And right now I'm in my 40th year. And I'm looking out. I used to say, what will you do when I'm 92? And one of my friends, Kimberly Naylor, just posted a post on Facebook of her aunt who's 105 and wearing jeans and cutoffs and just really still living life. And so as you each think about ending the year 2021, should you really be able to go into 2022 without written goals for your life? So that's the purpose of our annual meeting, Galen. And we want to also remind everybody, the investment right now is only $79. Yes. The investment after Wednesday is going up to $179 because I have been urged and encouraged to continue to leave the special price. Again, this is the third time, and I'm saying right now to everybody, I'm not like many who have deep pockets. So this is an investment I make of time, talents, treasure, and to the point of sometimes not breaking even because I want to make sure people have an awesome experience. But the bar, we know people don't respect what they don't pay for. And my friend Les Brown says, the more we pay, the more we pay attention. But I really want to encourage all of us, bring our families. If you're traveling, please plan to join us in Boca Raton on the 7th and the 8th of January 2022. All right, Galen?
Yeah, I mean, again, that is a perfect example of the sixth sense, because when we met, I could have done anything, right? I could have gone left instead of going right. I could have decided to sit down instead of continuing to walk. And I could have told you anything, right? But because I followed that hunch, because I followed that instinct, to your point, there are no chances. And I want to bring back in something that Janna said earlier, which I think is absolutely true. This information is always being communicated. The question is, will you pay attention? Will you respond? It's almost like a radio channel, right? The radio information is always transmitting. the question is, will you turn the dial to the station where you can pick up the information? And so I wanted to come back around to each of you and just ask, what are some key ahas that you've picked up from this conversation? What are some significant points that have captured your imagination just from this talk that we've had? And I'll start with you, Ms. Ann.
Oh
What?
wow. Well, I have to get my Janna notes out. So so I'm sure the public would not mind, but yes, I have been writing Janna, and I'm just going to read that way I can just make sure I don't I'm not going to share everything because we don't want to share everything. But Janna, one of the things that you said that really resonated with me when you said train yourself and keep building. And as a builder, I am very clear that it all starts with a good, strong foundation. And I believe that this principle and this philosophy, along with the word, the other book, is giving us that. And then you said, notice what you notice. And one of the ways for me on a daily basis that I notice what I notice is by journaling. I journal in the evening and then in the morning, but also during the day, I may just jot a note because as much as I would like to think that I'm going to remember, sometimes I walk into a room and I don't remember why. But anyway, you also told us to trust yourself and that 1 + 1 = a greater power. And we know that comes from another place where we hear that where 2 or 3 are together, there's another in the midst. But you also shared, you said, listen to what's happening around you. And I took that to mean not the hearing that you hear with your ear, but sometimes we can listen with our spirit. I have lots of other things. I will tell you this, though. One of the things that you shared about your philanthropic efforts just gave me another a goal to set because I am a Rotarian and our Palm Beach County Rotary, every year we give out books to third graders, all the third graders in our county. We work with the local school system and we give away dictionaries. Yes, we have a dictionary program as a Rotarian, and we give away. We actually meet with the school and then share the dictionaries, and the kids, we have their names in them. But the idea of using this philosophy, I want to give a shout out to Abundant Health, Miss Shante Wells, because she has now started a Christmas program to give this book away to youth. And also the Napoleon Hill Foundation has a phenomenal program where it will donate these Think and Grow Rich books to the schools. So, Janna, you may want to connect with Don Green in terms of seeing how you may also participate in that program in terms of maybe getting some books in addition to the book that you're writing to share with the kids. So thank you so very much. And I listen again, Galen, this has been a phenomenal show of thought and just learning how, Janna, from you, how you're able, and Galen said it, 3, 4 restaurants, and that's the part you shared because we know there's a lot more than just that. Okay. So listen to the sixth sense. Thank you.
And how can people get a hold of you, Miss Ann, if they want to?
Thank you, Galen. Thank you for that. Ann McNeil, the master builder, helping to build stronger and better lives and businesses. And you can connect with me naturally to get the 6 keys to riches by texting the word Ann, ANN, at 55678. But for greater clarity in your life and in your business, you can connect with us by going to annmcneil.com/coaching. And we host a clarity mastermind once a month. But the exercises that we do is really giving you an opportunity to learn how to connect with the sixth sense. So annmcneil.com.
Well, fantastic. And Janna, I want to come back to you. I know very often when I'm on a show, when I'm being interviewed, I have things that I want to talk about. But even in that conversation, I get ahas. I get inspirations. I get hunches that come to me. What are some inspirations or hunches or ahas that you've captured from this conversation? And what are some final thoughts that you'd want to share with the audience about the significance of the sixth sense?
Well, we shared several times during the show that nothing happens by accident. And being here today, I do have a vision of sharing my personal story of triumph and being my own champion. And, even to hear Anne say, well, you really should join the NSA, and me happening to be going on a journey next week to better myself and develop my skill. I don't think that's a chance. And I don't think that's it's an encounter that I have to really go, isn't that interesting that this came up today? And, one of the things that I go through life trying to do, because I've noticed that it keeps me feeling in a more positive light, is that I try to trade my expectations of the world and of everybody in my environment for appreciation of them. And when you approach everybody with appreciation instead of expecting something from them or expecting something from the program or as a guest or as a host, you can really appreciate what it is about the people that they're bringing to you. And I would say that's probably my final comments would be just trade your expectation for appreciation, and everything around you changes. So I think that's what I'm leaving with today, the whole no chance encounters and how important that is to recognize.
Fantastic. And how can people get a hold of you if they want to hear more of your story and be aware of new projects and books as you publish them?
I would say on social media, I live most in LinkedIn. So Janna Dutton in LinkedIn. I think Brittany might have that link she could share. And on my website, jannadutton.com, you can feel free to contact me through there.
Well, fantastic. Well, I'll tell you, your one of your stories reminds me of something that I heard, and I can't remember who I heard this from, so I can't credit this properly. But I did hear someone say, "How do I make money?" is not a bad question to ask. It's just a bad first question. The first question should be, "How can I be of service?" And I just love the fact that you are going down this path with a focus on philanthropy, with a focus on helping kids. And that's your first question is, how can I be of service? And now all these other opportunities to potentially make money from it just seem to be coming out of seemingly nowhere. But it's because your first inclination was not about how to make money from it, which is not a bad question. Any conversation with Ann McNeil, and she's going to say, but what about the money? It's just a bad first question. I just love the fact that you've got the priorities in the right place. And so that was one of the things that was not a coincidence that it struck me that way. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. My personal mantra is a giving heart grows, right? And like you, I ask the question, what can I do by the money that I receive? The more that you give out into the world, the more you receive, whether it be money or knowledge or time, all of these gifts that we have to share, not just money.
Yeah, I love it.
Galen. Yeah, Galen, I want to just mention a couple of things before we start wrapping up. And I see that we have just a minute. If you can tell us your Think and Grow Rich Mastermind LinkedIn, we would love to support you in that. We talked briefly about that. And Brittany, if you can put that in the chat for everybody. And if you have it, Janna, if you can put it in the chat, and then we can share it with the world, because we really want to support you and encourage you in that effort on LinkedIn. But also, I just wrote 5 more Janna quotes. And as I wrote the last one, I wrote the word Janna quotes. You really should consider doing something called Janna quotes something, because you have so many soul quotes that are just heartfelt. And it comes from a place, I just, in my heart, I get a warm feeling. And you reminded me of something that I read this morning. I don't remember who wrote it, but he talked about the greatest of these is love. And then he did this debate between charity and all of these things, and it kept coming back to love. And that's what I feel coming from you. And even without words, your spirit just emanates. And so this is a perfect example of the principle. It's the sixth sense at work. And your face, I think, is a really good, not just your face, but your spirit, if you will. Let's go there before we start wrapping up. And so I just would like to honor you, if you will, and allow us to send back to you what you're sending to us, and by helping you promote whatever it is that you're doing, because we really want to share more of you with the world. And so, and I think that because the National Speakers Association has an international, global speakers connection, and they are in Canada in a big way, I really think that it will serve your philanthropic efforts to help you elevate that platform to the international space, if you will. All right, Gail.
Thanks, Anne. I really accept that. I think sometimes it's really hard for us to recognize the gifts that we put out because they come so natural to us that they're not magic to us. And to everyone else that sees them, they need to acknowledge that in other people, because sometimes they can't recognize it themselves. So I thank you for that. I appreciate
Oh,
you.
most definitely.
Wow, I
Most
love that. I'm going to write that down. The things that come natural to us don't seem magic to us, because you're so true. You're so true.
Mhm.
Well, this has been another incredible show,
Always.
and I'm going to invite you guys to come back next week when we're going to have another amazing conversation with an incredible guest, Miss Danielle Odom Jenkins. And we're going to continue this conversation about the sixth sense, because this is the power of the process. This is the power of the philosophy. And you don't have to understand this philosophy in order to benefit from it and to use it. So that's the thing that I really want to encourage everyone to embrace. If you don't have a copy of this book, you are doing yourself a disservice. Get a copy, get it on Audible, get it in hard copy, get a Kindle version. I think I got like 3 different versions, so I can get the inspiration regardless of where I am. My name is Galen Bingham. I'm the leadership strategist. There's so many different ways of getting hold of me on Facebook and all the social media platforms, but the most fun way is to do a search for my podcast, Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership, where we have real talk that you can't get from anywhere else. We talk to key leaders. We understand what they do and how they do it, and how you can benefit from their wisdom. One of the guests that we're going to have on the show in a couple of weeks is Ms. Ann McNeil. So you're going to hear her story in more depth and more detail. But I double dog dare you to search any platform: Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, Spotify. Right now, plug in Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership, and subscribe. I absolutely guarantee you that if you try it just once, you'll fall in love with the inspiration and wisdom that you're getting from the leaders that we talk to. Well, this is another incredible show episode. And I do hope you come back next week as we have another conversation about this incredible philosophy and continue our conversation on the sixth sense. Until next time, take care.